I saw the earlier kind of warning, there are 5 words around, okay? I hope I'm under control, okay? With that, I want to introduce the next speaker, discussing Dr. Aron Shlonsky. Please come forward.
Thank you. Okay, so it's really nice to not use PowerPoint. I really am liking this. So that said, I don't usually do it. So can I ask just kind of another, I know we've done this before, how many of you are actually practitioners, administrators, managers in the room? And how many are researchers or profs or what have you, students? Okay. So there's a really great chance here. I'm not going to go into too much impersonations of actors or anything like that, although that was quite fun. Just to say, I think actually clinical data mining, I think the idea of it and the use of existing data is brilliant. And I just want to start there. It has to be done. And it is being done all the time. I look in my field in child welfare, and there was a massive revolution in child welfare based on data that were gathered as a matter of course in the big child welfare management information systems. And we, for the first time in the 90s or so, maybe getting out into the early part of this century, have figured out what the pathways are of children and families through the child welfare system in the U.S. and now increasingly in other countries. And it has revolutionized the way things are done. And in fact, not saying I am attributing it to this, but the number of children in foster care in the United States has decreased by a huge amount over the last, say, 5-10 years. From 500,000 down to about 400,000 now. That's huge, right? So the ability to harness information that we gather every day as practitioners, as child welfare workers, entering placement dates, where kids are located, what type of placement it is, and then what reasons for placement shift and all that. Those are really, really concrete, good, and useful things for us to, at the back end, look at. And in that case, there is no attrition problem. We know who came in, and we know when they came out, and we know when they came back in. You use survival analysis model and what have you. The right censoring problem isn't about attrition. That's for the researchers in the room. Sorry about that. I didn't intend to say that. I'll try to speak a little bit more to the point. I just want to reiterate, and I think maybe others will do that as well, that, and I don't honestly think that anybody now thinks EDP and EIP is equated with RCT. So evidence-based practice, let me just say it again, is not about just doing random control trials. If it were that easy, we wouldn't have these discussions. I think we need, I like actually the circle of evidence in the sense that it is recursive, that we never actually fully know, and that it requires all sorts of different kinds of evidence for us to actually more fully understand what it is that we're dealing with. I kind of think of it as a patchwork of evidence coming from different places, quantitative, qualitative, what have you. But it's a matter of what question to pose at what time. And I would say that the last thing that I would want to do is to just, as an agency administrator or as a practitioner, just say, wow, there's an RCT out there, we ought to give that to our clients. I mean, what is the distribution of the problem in the population that we're dealing with? What is the problem? What is the question? What level of evidence is sufficient? I might want to survey people in my agency and figure out what they think some of the problems are. I might want to survey my practitioners. God forbid, I might want to do some focus groups and figure out how people feel about the services that they're provided. All right? These are all forms of evidence, and they all tell us different parts of the story. And I really like the implementation stuff that's going on, because that's a really nice framework for saying, it's more than just that manual. It's far more than that. It has to do, that clinical interaction that you all have with clients is set in a context. that context is really turns out to be probably every bit as important as what's being done with the client. I mean, people live in society, in communities, in families, and that history has to make a difference. And I think the more information we can find out about those things, the more we can fill in this patchwork with evidence. I was having a really great discussion with somebody a little bit earlier and talked about the hierarchy of evidence. Well, we always talk about this hierarchy as if it's all about effectiveness. It's not just about effectiveness, for one. There are different kinds of questions. You know, what's the best instrument for diagnosis for depression, let's say? That's not an RCT question at all. The hierarchy simply doesn't apply there. There's a different hierarchy. What about prognostic tools? Predicting what's going to happen in the future? Or epidemiological tools? You know, how do you tell what the prevalence of something is in a given population? These are all different kinds of questions. They have different kinds of hierarchies. And even within the effectiveness hierarchy, often I see RCT at the top of that hierarchy, at the top of that pyramid. It's not at the top of the pyramid. Systematic review would be at the top of that pyramid. Not a meta-analysis, a systematic review. Those are two different things. Systematic review is a systematic search of the evidence, including unpublished literature, different languages, multiple raters, try to decrease bias as much as possible. And that would, for me, be on top of an RCT. How many RCTs does it take to make an effective service, for us to call a service effective? I don't have the answer to that. And I hope I never do. I need a systematic review. And the answer may change over time. And that's why I don't like lists of effective services. We might find that actually it used to work, it doesn't now. Or something like that. Or it works for some people and not others. I'm going to go for a building on what Erwin was going to say, and that is the research. The word research has a read in it, and it implies that you have a first search. And often that first search is probably the data that you're collecting. And I'd go a step further and say, if we can be a bit more planful about what data you're collecting, then we're going to be much better off when we do the read search as opposed to the first stuff. And I'll go a step further and say, if the data that you're collecting isn't useful to you in your job right now, then perhaps we should be collecting different things. And that we've kind of driven to this compliance-based culture, where we just fill things out because on our computer screens, you know, there's a big promise of, hey, we'll get computers and then we'll be able to spend more time with clients. Has that materialized for anybody? No. That's not my experience. And so I think if we really want to make clinical data mining really great, what we need to do is be proactive in terms of what data we're collecting. Can we get some of that model fidelity data in there? Can we get some more reliable kind of looks at exactly what is being done to what effect with clients? Can we, God forbid, go to more single subject designs where we're actually tracking clients through and we're taking measurements at given points? At the end of the day, we can mine those data. Right? You don't have to be part of a research study. You have to be part of providing practice and using systematically information, putting systematically information in, getting systematically information out. And that's when the data will become more reliable and valid because we're actually using it with our clients. So I think it's great. I think clinical data mining is, whatever we call it, is using the evidence that is already there is a really good thing. I do think that we can be more proactive at it. There are ways to approximate better designs using clinical data mining, and we're finding statistical techniques to do that all the time. There's a fantastic study, and I'll close with this, done in Chicago in the 80s, limitation, where they looked at the effect of foster care. Really? How do you do that? It's not an RCT. Well, it turns out that different caseworkers have different proclivities for making decisions to place children in care or not. And if you can somehow measure that, and it can be measured, that is a piece of variability. And that piece of variability can be applied over time to look at kids who would have gotten placed in foster care, but they weren't because they ran into a caseworker that didn't have that particular tendency. And you basically, this guy compared the groups over time, linked multiple databases using clinical data mining, and looked at whether or not they did better over time. And we're talking teen pregnancy, we're talking employment, we're talking education, a range of things. Joseph Doyle, I'd like you want to look at this. So he found that kids on the margin, that is that kids who were in the middle, kids who were in kind of maltreatment, well, basically they were in situations where nobody would place them. They weren't in those situations. They weren't in situations where everybody would place them. Like you walk in the house, it's just, oh my gosh, and anybody would. But kids on the margin, in the middle, who received services from child protection agencies in the 1980s in Illinois, limit, did less well than kids who did not get foster care. Amazing study. Very cool. All done with retrospective data. And we can't do that with RCT because you can't randomly assign kids to foster care. So I'll close with that, and I'll let other people go on with this.
Thank you so much. This is a great wonderful response, and